Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our no our October monthly meeting for the Design Advocacy Group. It's a pleasure to have everyone. We've got a great turnout tonight, so thank you all for joining. We're going to go through some advocacy items, go through some other things that are happening, upcoming events, and then get into it. My name is Eli Storch, the chair of the Design Advocacy Group. Um, and it's wonderful to have everyone here today. Uh, we are going to have a chance to share things that are going on, so that chat is there for you. Please feel free to drop anything you want to share with us, exhibitions, links to things that are going on, advocacy items, news articles we should all be paying attention to. Please feel free to throw those into the chat there, and we'll make sure to cover them and ask you to unmute and share a little bit about what's going on. So please use that chat and feel free. The first thing, we have a few items to get through. We are beginning our Dig Deep for DAG annual fundraising push. We do it at the end of the year, and this year we are off and running now. We're at 4% in our first few hours of contributions, which we greatly appreciate. And you can go to the Support DAG tab on our website to contribute. This is a particularly interesting year for us. The Center for Architecture, Center for Design Philadelphia, as many of you know it, is closing, and Design Philadelphia, AIA, Monument Lab, CDC, and a bunch of others are moving over to the newly named Village of Industry and Arts, which is the old Hamilton Hall that Scout is redeveloping on Broad Street. So uh, we are losing our home, but we are incredibly grateful to Rebecca Johnson and Jelani Abdulaziz and Lois Seskin and the whole team at Design Philadelphia and AIA Philadelphia for all of the support they've given us over the years to make 1218 Arch Street our home. But now we are in for a year of trying some new locations. So please always check where the event is going forward, because we are not going to be at our typical home. And with that comes some increase in costs, some new event fees, and other things. And our goal is to never charge a ticket price for DAG events. So anything that you're able to contribute is a big help. We were able to host 18 events this past year, about two-thirds of which were in person, and as well as our advocacy agenda, which we publish on our website, was reported on in the Inquirer, Billy Penn, WHYY, BizNow, and other places. So please contribute if you're able. All donations are tax deductible, and we do really greatly appreciate your support. So I'll limit that plug here. And then let's jump into things that are going on around the city. Next week, the Preservation Alliance at Docomomo is hosting the Roundhouse Reimagine Symposium. Uh, 31 teams submitted concepts to that symposium, and DAG was fortunate to be selected. So we will be presenting our mixed use concept there, which includes some interesting cultural opportunities, much needed residential density, and a new bus station, which we've been talking about uh, for anyone who's been paying attention to DAG. We've been talking about bus stations quite a bit. So get your tickets. You can go. The link is in the chat. You can grab tickets and come out to that event, uh, which will be a lot of fun. There is an optional tour ahead of time, so all the information's there in that link. Next up, uh, you can't sleep on SEPTA. Can't forget SEPTA. We've talked a lot about what happens when you use your operations, well, when you fund your operations with money that was meant to be future proofing your system, buying new cars, dealing with maintenance. Well, stuff like this happens, and it happens so quickly after we received funding that it is an immediate reminder that we need to stay vigilant and keep working. So Transit Forward Philadelphia is really leading the charge here. Follow them, get in touch with them if you want to be involved. There's a lot that they're doing, and they're involved with electeds, both in Philadelphia and in Harrisburg. So they're a really great resource to learn what's going on, and and stay up to date with all things SEPTA. So David Brownlee, you want to jump in here? I know you have something you were going to share with us.
Yes, I just wanted to draw people's attention to something that probably has caught their attention already, and that is that yesterday the Preservation Alliance released the report that they commissioned from Place Economics. And as you see, it's called Growing Through Preservation. It was intended to look hard at both the economic and the social impact of Philadelphia's historic preservation activities. I mean, and some of the things I suppose you could say were familiar, but bigger. Over the last 15 years, Philadelphia has had $4 billion in investment that came through historic tax incentivized activities, including $140 million in wages. But to me, one of the most interesting things about it is that in addition to talking about about that economic impact, it identifies in our protected historic areas of the city, greater densification and increasing diversity. This is where the city is growing fastest, um, and where it is becoming, I would have to say, as I think about it, more like the city we want it to be. And in this climate of national economic, or I guess you could say high-level disregard for historic buildings, this is an important message, and we put the link in the chat. I just see there. Take a look at it. It is a surprisingly interesting read, in part because it goes far beyond what we normally think of as just historic preservation per se. It's about Philadelphia as it is becoming. Thanks.
Thanks, David. There's also a couple articles that Nika's dropping in the chat that have picked up the story and are covering it. So other good reads there. Um, I'm going to go out of order here. George, you want to jump in and quickly talk about disregard of historic buildings? George Claflin, all right, can you unmute?
Oh my gosh,
No,
this is great.
George, you're muted.
you're muted, George.
I'm on mute.
All right. Oh, there you are, George. We hear you.
You want me to talk or you want to talk, Eli?
No, you go for it.
Okay.
These are your,
Well,
yeah.
I think everybody's aware of what's going on in Washington. So, and this is not the time to debate it in some detail, but I think the physical presence of what is actually happening there is worthy of noting in our group that is so visually oriented. I think there's another slide that shows a diagram. Yes, a very crude diagram of the East Wing. The big yellow oblong is the new uh, uh, ballroom, as it's called, that dwarfs the White House in terms of square footage. I think even that little oblong is less big than the actual proposed building. I think if the White House were in Philadelphia, I don't think they would have even gotten a demolition permit. But apparently things are not as strict in Washington as we think they are, at least when it comes to the White House. So I'll just go on from there. Many of you have noticed probably that the Logan Circle fountain has been turned off since sometime in June. I've been in discussion with the Parks and Recreation, and so has Preservation Alliance, and probably quite a few others. There's 3 pumps involved. Only one of them was running when this particular picture was taken. I thought they were turning it back on. It was in fact a test, and they promised me it will be turned on in the spring, but we have no fountain, have had no fountain since late June. Another non-visual item, very interesting, is that the mayor has basically ousted the mayor of Philadelphia. I'll come to the Princeton thing in a moment. The mayor of Philadelphia has ousted Herb Wetzel, who was the longtime planning director of council's planning arm, and he was also the head of the land bank. And the chair of the land bank is now Angela Brooks, who came to DAG. We had a one-on-one with her in May. She is the chief housing officer of Philadelphia, and the expectation is that the land bank will be much more favorable to subsidized and workforce housing now that the leadership has changed. And the last item is the Princeton controversy. The director of the Princeton Museum, which has a new home, which is shown in a somewhat unappealing photograph above, gratuitously commented that he thought the project drawings below for some subsidized workforce housing in Princeton were banal. This led to a great response from many people in the Princeton government saying, well, if Princeton, the university, could help us a little bit with payment in lieu of taxes, maybe we could make it less banal. Thank you very much. So I don't intend to bring up either a critique of the museum design or the housing design specifically this morning, but you should be aware that it's an interesting tempest in a very elite teapot. That's it.
Thanks for sharing those, George.
Thank
Kat,
you.
you want to jump in and talk trees?
Sure. Just wanted to share a quick update. In addition to being DAG steering committee, I'm also a neighborhood tree tender, and we are getting really close to our fall planting date, which is November 15th, that weekend. It's overlapping with Love Your Park Day, so it's a great opportunity for volunteerism in general. And DAG has spoken many times about how important tree canopy is to our urban infrastructure. So I just want to put in a little plug to volunteer. And the last point on that is that if you would like a street tree or yard tree, Nika's going to drop a link in, and the application for deadlines to get a tree planted in our spring planting session is November 1st. So you have about a week left to do that. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to help.
And the link is in the chat. Thank you, Kat. So Marcia, do you want to jump in and detail our final two events at the Center for Design Philadelphia?
Yes, yes. Thanks, Eli. And I'd like to say a few words about next month's program. You know that the Trump administration is seeking to retell the story of America's founding. President Trump has issued an order to restore truth and sanity to American history. I'm with great urgency because Philadelphia will be hosting hundreds of thousands of tourists next year and to celebrate our 250th anniversary. So much attention will be focused on our city. And President Trump, in his effort to whitewash American history, is seeking to erase the history of slavery. As you know, the President's House educates visitors about Washington's ties to slavery and is also a memorial to the people who were enslaved there. Although the President's House has been targeted for removal and alteration, so far the displays currently remain in place, and fingers crossed. The establishment of the President's House, its recent threat, and its future will be explored by our two speakers, lawyer and activist Michael Cord, the founding member of ATTACK, Avenging the Ancestors Coalition, and Troy Leonard, a principal of Kelly Mayella Architects, the designers of the President's House and Memorial. Together, they'll discuss the challenges to the site's integrity, and predictions. The event is in person at 1218 Art Street on November 12th at 5:30 in the evening. And what's next in December? Another very significant program, an evening with John Fry, the new and 15th president of Temple University. As you know, John Fry was the former president of Drexel and had established a reputation as both a civic leader in Philadelphia and a national leader in higher education. We are really honored that he'll be speaking at our December 17th meeting in person at 5:30, also at 1218 Arch Street. please join us for both events. Back to you, Eli.
Thank you, Marcia. We hope you'll sign up and attend. We don't need signups, but they do help us understand how much food and drink to buy, and it's nice to know who's going to be there. And our December 17th will be an opportunity to say goodbye to the Center for Design Philadelphia as we strike off on our next chapter. So yes, please sign up. All those links are in the chat. And not seeing any other items to share right now, please let's jump into it. We're going to have a Q&A at the end. So as you have questions about the program, throw them in the chat. And we'll do our best to get them answered. And I'm going to pass the baton over to my colleague, Nate Hummel, on the DAG Steering Committee, who serves as the Director of Planning and Design at the University City District. And he's going to get us moving today. Nate?
Okay, hello, everybody. So when DRWC opened Spruce Street Harbor Park in 2014, it completely changed the game. It followed a wave of bold experiments, the PHS pop-up beer garden on South Broad Street in 2013, and the porch at 30th Street, near and dear to my heart, by University City District in 2012. Together, these projects proved that something powerful, like that non-permanent interventions can have a lasting impact. As great as the porch and the PHS beer garden were, nothing matched the energy of Spruce Street Harbor Park. It brought people back to the Delaware River Waterfront for the first time in generations. A place that had long been forgotten suddenly became Philadelphia's summer living room. That success built the trust and momentum that allowed DRWC to move from pop-ups to truly transformative public spaces, projects that Joe, Lizzie, and Karen will share with you today. After the presentation, we'll open it up for questions. So please join me in welcoming Joe Forkin, Lizzie Woods, and Karen Thompson. Take it away.
Thanks, Nate. Hi, I'm Joe Forkin. I'm joined, as Nate said, by Lizzie Woods, our Senior Vice President for Strategic Planning and Real Estate Development, and Karen Thompson, our Director of Planning, Policy, and Engagement. The most difficult thing for me here is going to be sharing my screen. So let me do that and get the presentation up. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Again, good morning, everyone. We were asked to come here this morning to talk about, development on the waterfront, and we haven't been with DAG in a while, and we appreciate the invitation. So where I thought we could start is to sort of some background on DRWC and tell the story about the work that we're doing and the strategy behind how the waterfront is redeveloping. And to do that properly, I think we need to go through some of the things that we've done and the theories in the master plan. My slide is not advancing. So DRWC's mission very broadly is to plan, build, and manage public spaces, parks, and venues along 6 miles of the waterfront, roughly from Allegheny Avenue in Port Richmond to Oregon Avenue in South Philadelphia. So that's sort of the formal thing. What it's really about is reconnecting Philadelphia to its waterfront. There's a long stretch of time in history where the waterfront was closed off to the public, be that through industry, through rail, or through the construction of the highway of I-95. And our job is to somehow reconnect the city back to the river. And the concept here is that on multiple levels that the public realm leads that charge. And if it's a quality public realm that's well maintained, it will foster and catalyze private development and investment on the waterfront. And we do this through 3 broad responsibilities. The first is planning and development, which has to do really with the public realm, designing and building waterfront destinations and parks, connecting that back to the city under, over, and around I-95 through our Connector Street program, and then connecting all that through a continuous trail network that would run 6 miles and connect all of those things. And while doing that, promoting and supporting the private development opportunities on the waterfront so that we can realize more investment. The next category is activating the waterfront, as Nate was alluding to. And there's different activations on the waterfront that reflect the different communities that want to use it. Some are very, very active. And you can see here the total programs that we had last year on the waterfront that were either community driven, arch driven, programmatically driven, concerts, different experience for people, all the way down to and including just reflective and contemplative spaces in some of our open spaces. And then, as I think everyone was alluding to in the beginning of this, the really important, initiative and part of that is to properly maintain the waterfront. You can't just build something and not properly maintain it. So, like a very small special services district, the DRWC employs an entire operations crew that secures the waterfront from a safety perspective, maintains it from both a landscape and building perspective, and continues that connection across to Camden by operating the Riverlink ferry system, which is a multimodal waterborne system that connects across the river. I'm going to fast forward and then go back. So the fast forward here is that all of these things combined, this is the concept that we have, is that if the public realm, good quality public realm leads the way, that it will attract private investment. And this is sort of the by the numbers slide. When we first started work, the waterfront was a fragmented place that had areas of industry, a couple of parks, completely unconnected and from the city proper. And since we've started working and building out the public realm, you can see these numbers here. I won't read them all to you, but the investment is starting to pay off with the new residential units on the waterfront, the private investment reaching about 2.3 billion right now, the public programming that we're able to do to continue to attract eyes and presence and investment on the waterfront. And so here, we want to go back through time and talk about some of the things that we've already built that tie into this entire plan. And I should say here to Karen and Lizzie, interrupt me at any time and add any flavor to this that you'd like. But over the past 15 years, we've really taken this, building parks, connecting it by the trail very seriously. And so here's what the map looks like, that you can see what we've built, what we have in progress, and what's still in planning and construction here. But this outlines that thought that I provided to everyone, which is that the trail acts as a consistent spine, connecting a park every half mile to each connector street as it gets over I-95. And by building out that public realm, we then lure private investment to the waterfront. So the trail, since it's been built, has attracted about 1.7 million trips. This is amazing to me. I've been on the waterfront for 28 years now. And every park that we open, every connector street that we open, and every trail segment we open continues to impress me in terms of the use that it receives, how it falls so seamlessly into the fabric of the city once that it's open for everyone to use. And then the connections to the waterfront, as I was saying before, before we started working here, each street, each connector was completely disconnected. It was a place that you did not want to walk through. You did not know the river was on the other side of it. So this connector street program and connections was very important in terms of breaching that sort of physical and psychological barrier of I-95 and attracting people, bicyclists, pedestrians, joggers, just the city and the upland neighborhoods from the waterfront back to the river again, so that they knew that that asset could be both explored and it was theirs. Some of the activations that we do on the waterfront, I'll run through a couple fast ones here. So Cherry Street Pier is a historic pier built in 1919, about a 55,000 square foot pier. It was sort of testament to the shipping prowess of Philadelphia historically. That we went through a lot of ideas about what Cherry Street Pier could be. It was called Pier 9, Municipal Pier 9 originally. And, could it be redeveloped? But every redevelopment plan that we sought with a private developer would tear down the facade of Cherry Street Pier and replace that with a development. We didn't think that was appropriate. The history here was absolutely worth preserving and should have been preserved. And so we sought out to make this a public community gathering space that is really focused on Philadelphia creative economy. We have 14 artists in residence here, varied talks, markets, and different things to attract the community. You can see some of the visitation numbers that Cherry Street Pier receives annually and some of the events that are in there. So this is one of our active attractions on the waterfront. The other is the Blue Cross River Rink, and both Summerfest and Winterfest. Again, this is a temporary activation meant to show a recreational side to the waterfront, what can be attracted here, how families, both within the city of Philadelphia and regionally, can approach the waterfront from different perspectives. And Spruce Street Harbor Park, as Nate alluded to, which has become a sort of beloved attraction in the summertime for the city of Philadelphia. This always continues to impress me, the amount of people and where they come from here. Every zip code in the city of Philadelphia every summer visits here. All 48 contiguous states visit here. I think there was 9 different countries that visited Harbor Park. So it's become a great attraction and the sort of magnet for the waterfront to attract additional investment. And then we have, of course, the experiences outside of what we call our active attractions, because the waterfront really reflects the planning process that we go through and the public engagement that we have, and how each of the parks that we develop reflect the community input into them. And so we call these sort of our reflective piers. Washington Avenue Pier, the former immigration station for the city of Philadelphia, that's developed into a wonderful ecological park. The artwork that you see there is called Land Buoy by an artist named Jody Pinto to commemorate that. Race Street Pier, one of our first initiatives, again, a passive park, really just known for its sort of quiet and the yoga and health and wellness programs that happen there. And Pier 68, which is a park down in the future wetlands park that we'll talk about in a moment. But again, a passive space reflecting what the people wanted to do in that area. So all of that combined, all the stuff that we're going through right now, the creation of the parks, the creation of the connector streets, activating the waterfront, all of that is playing into this proof of concept that if we lead with the public realm, if we lead with people forward engagement, that private investment will start to follow and fill out the waterfront. So that's the strategy. That's the idea in each of the parks that we build, each of the trail segments that we build, each of the activations or programs that we put on the waterfront is meant to attract investment. And so to date, it's probably a little bit more than this right now, but we've completed about 12 projects and have invested with our partners, both government partners, philanthropic partners, private partners, $100 million into public realm projects or infrastructure projects on the waterfront. We have 6 other major projects underway that we'll talk about that are in various states of either design, planning, and construction. And as a case for this, so this is the concept, the public realm leads the way and private investment follows. The case study that we had in the earliest improvements that we put was in what we called the Race Street node that has 3 public improvements associated with it. The Race Street Pier, about a $7 million investment. The Race Street Connector, so connecting the upland neighborhood directly to that park and asset, about roughly a $3 million project. And Cherry Street Pier, which was a phase 1 of $5 million. So that in turn, as we look at it, could we prove the concept that public realm would then turn around and create private investment? And we see just in that node that there's $154 million of private investment that followed the public infrastructure that we created on the ground. It's a 10-to-1 return on investment from public to private investment here. And you can probably familiar with all of these: Fringe Arts, One Water, 205 Race, and Morgan's Pier. And then that energy, as the trail developed and everything started to develop, started to push north. And so from roughly Race Street to Penn Treaty Park, there's further investment that has happened on the waterfront. About 1,100 residential units have been added, $1 billion of investment. The North Bank site in Fishtown, Port Richmond is open. The battery site, preserving that wonderful Delaware generating station adjacent to Penn Treaty Park, is open, about a $482 million project. And one that's very close to our hearts, and my heart especially, is the Rivermark Northern Liberties development, about a $225 million development. I always tell this story, but when I started working on the waterfront, that was the East Central incinerator site and the impoundment lot for the city of Philadelphia. So if you got too many tickets, your car was taken to the site. That site went through many iterations. We completely remediated the site from an environmental perspective with the Army Corps of Engineers and the DEP. It became Festival Pier, hosting large national concerts for a while, and then a private development group that we partnered with came in, and I'm really happy to say Rivermark is now open and thriving. It's about 52% leased as we speak. And then just on the west side of Delaware Avenue, as that energy was pushing northward, you can see these other developments there. Another 1,200 residential units and about $500 million of investment are taking place on the west side of Delaware Avenue, adjacent to that. Excuse me, adjacent to what's happening on the riverside. And you know, sort of going forward now, thinking about how that northern stretch of the Delaware River is really starting to fit out. The trail is connecting up through the parks there. The private development is really reshaping the sort of streetscape and the energy within the waterfront. There are projects. Again, this is a concept project, and I know this is one of the areas that DAG was interested in. This is a Wharton Piers project that is down near Washington Avenue. This is a proposal right now that is met with, I think, some community approval. The plans have been submitted to the city of Philadelphia. This would be about a 600 resident tower that happens here. It's exciting for us to see the development there. Hopefully something like this can go forward in South Philadelphia. What's also exciting for us is that through the zoning code and the Central Delaware overlay, which attempts to codify the master plan for the Central Delaware into law, there's a bonus system. And part of that bonus system for a height on a building is that the private developer can build out some of the public realm. In this case, it will be a trail connection. We have a temporary trail connection for the Delaware River Trail, excuse me, from Washington Avenue to roughly Reed Street, and then we pick up with the permanent trail again. This development, if it were to go forward, relies on that bonus to build out the permanent trail segment that would run from Washington Avenue to Reed Street. So private development coupled with public investment here can continue to fit out the public realm and that quality space along the waterfront. And these are 6 current projects that we have. As I said before, they're in sort of various states of either design, planning, or construction. They all concentrate toward the south, the biggest, of course, being Penn's Landing Park, which will have its own slides toward the end, and then 2 projects in the north, the Delaware River Trail Extension Plan and the Cumberland Street Connector. But first up is the most significant development in the south. This is an ecological park, South Wetlands Park, and I may tag, Lizzie, if you don't mind, you in to do some of this.
Yeah, sure. The South Wetlands Park is a concept that was directly conceived of in the master plan for the Central Delaware when looking at these series of finger piers in South Philadelphia that had been abandoned for decades and were really returning to nature. The idea was that they were providing already some valuable habitat, especially for juvenile and spawning fish species in the Delaware. And the concept was what could be done to help encourage that kind of ecological uplift while also providing new forms of public access on what was a highly industrialized waterfront, what could be done to provide a combination of public access and ecological improvement. So DRWC acquired these 4 piers that you see here adjacent to the Walmart shopping center in South Philadelphia, came up with this concept of improving the habitat there through strategic removal of some sections of the piers and stabilization of the remaining piers, the construction of boardwalks that would link these spaces for public access and also work to attenuate some of the wave action in the berths to improve the ability of those areas to sustain plant growth and other forms of habitat there. This project has been through a lot of revision. And I think based on close coordination with the regulatory agencies that oversee these things. So I'm happy to say that this is currently before seeking its joint permit from the Army Corps of Engineers and the DEP. But we have some fun renderings here of what this could look like, and we're in active fundraising for the first phase of construction, which would focus on the southern portion of this area around Pier 70 and linking it to the open park at Pier 68. Long term, we would love to see some opportunities for actual recreation in the water. So we have plans for a kayak launch down here. This is part of an effort DRWC is involved in with other partners along the waterfront to look at ways of improving in-water recreational opportunities for folks in the Delaware. So.
That's great. Thanks, Lizzie. Next one up is one in construction right now, maybe not as ambitious as the South Wetlands Park, but the Washington Avenue connector project, which is a big connector project for us. So there's a larger connector streets on the waterfront, Spring Garden being one that is complete from 2nd Street to the riverfront. But Washington Avenue, we were asked by the city of Philadelphia to take a broader look at Washington Avenue and how the connections to the waterfront can be improved from 4th Street to the waterfront. So this is the illustrative map of that. Lizzie, you can walk through some of the what we're trying to do to reconnect that.
Yeah, this is the overall full concept build of the Washington Avenue connector, really focused on, I would say, 2 main ideas. One is traffic safety improvements, and the other is greening. So the construction that's underway right now is really focused on the traffic and transportation improvements. So we're building out a protected shared use path along the southern side of the avenue. That would run all the way from Columbus Boulevard to 4th Street and link into the bicycle network west of there at 4th. And at each intersection doing curb bump outs, doing median islands as well, and making improvements to the traffic signals along here as well to improve pedestrian and bicycle safety along this corridor. And then in key places, particularly at Jefferson Square, at 4th Street, between 3rd and 4th Street, and then here, and you see this rendering at Columbus Boulevard, creating areas of what we're calling plazas or gateways by focusing on some improved landscaping and seating. The full build has some plans for under I-95 as well that we are looking to do in future phases, but we're very excited about the pedestrian and bicycle safety improvements that will be made as part of this project, which, as Joe mentioned, and as you can see in these photos, is currently under construction. We are anticipating it being complete in late spring or early summer of next year.
Thanks, Lizzie. Again, all this goes into, just to back up the Washington Ave now. Again, this concept and theory that the proof of concept was the Ray Street node, sort of expanding northward, is that these connections. Right? So the park sits the Washington Avenue Pier, Pier 68, the future South Wetlands Park. This is the upland connector of that then connects into the trail network. So that network of public realm, we're hoping, really incentivize private development in the South Philadelphia area. The first example of that we showed was the Wharton Piers. We're hopeful something like that develops, and then the redevelopment further of the waterfront connection back into the South Philadelphia area and the city as a whole. Sort of moving northward is the extension of the Delaware River Trail into the sort of upper Port Richmond area connecting to Allegheny Avenue. And the first connection of that has to do with connecting the Penn Treaty Park through the Battery site. So the Delaware River Trail currently runs up into Penn Treaty Park, and then it hits a gate, a fence, a wall, the sort of changing landscape there in height to connect into the battery site where we already have a trail condition there. So Lizzie, I don't know if you want to give a little info about the timing.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a project that is I like to say small but mighty. It's only 100 foot of trail section, but will make a huge improvement in the accessibility of the trail between the public space at Penn Treaty Park and the private development at the Battery. The design is complete. We are right now going through our federally required environmental review process, which is always a beast of a process, even for a project this small. And of course, the current status of the federal government is putting even more pause on it. We were hoping to be under construction this fall. That might be pushed to early spring, but it's a small project, and we're still expecting the project to be done late spring of next year.
That's great. And then we get into the big guy. So the largest project that we've undertaken to date, Penn's Landing Park, which is, I guess, roughly about a $500 million project at this point. Here's an example of one of the first infrastructure improvements that will be standing up, we think, next year, having to do with that project, which is the extension of the South Street pedestrian bridge from where it lands right now in a parking lot on the west side of Delaware Avenue. Why it lands in a parking lot, I have no idea. But it's a very iconic structure that would then finally reconnect the South Street district to the waterfront. It lands in the terminus of the former Chart House site here. And then the big project, which is both the cap and cover for Penn's Landing Park. And you've probably seen some of these slides before, and the sort of geometry that went into and the engineering that went into trying to reconnect the historic core of the city and the waterfront together again. So this is the rendering. This is what it will look like. 12 acres, roughly, with different amenities spread out here. And I'll show a bunch of renderings for this project. This is well underway. We have wonderful partners in PennDOT, in the city of Philadelphia, our philanthropic partners through the William Penn Foundation, the Knight Foundation, and the Pew Charitable Trusts that have all come together to help fund this massive infrastructure improvement to reconnect the center of the waterfront to the city. Programmatically, this is what the park looks like, and you'll see here there, and I'll talk about this at the end. There's a development site that sits here forward, and another development site that sits in what we call the basin site, adjacent to the Penn's Landing Marina. But overall, programmatically, it places a lot of the activity that people have come to love about the waterfront, the ice skating rink, the events that happen at the stage area, the multicultural events that happen here, and really as a centerpiece to it, creates this pavilion and cafe area as the hub of the park, which then extends out to the playgrounds, the spray grounds, the sort of gathering space for the rink, the amphitheater space, and the Knights Common Gardens that are down here that we'll go through. So this is the Kieran Timberlake designed pavilion and cafe. Right now it's a mass timber structure, not yet built. PennDOT's still working, obviously. So we'll go through some of the sort of renderings here of what the park will look like once completed. These are the spray grounds adjacent to it here. A view looking from roughly Walnut Street, or where the current ferry terminal dock is, looking back west toward the city, the different gardens. And, Karen and Lizzie, hop in anywhere if you want to talk anything about these renderings. We've all seen them a number of times. You want to describe the Woodlands Playground?
Yeah, I mean, we can talk a little bit about it. I think just to Joe's point about, I think the overall goal of this project in terms of thinking about the program of the park was to include as much of the program that people had come to love about Penn's Landing. Penn's Landing has a decades-long history of being a civic gathering space for the city, and we were very conscious of needing and wanting to maintain that. So still having amphitheater space for big concerts and festivals, still having that ice skating rink with opportunities for summer programming there as well, but then adding in program elements that would make it more of a year-round and daily destination as well. So that could accommodate, you would come down for a big event with 10,000 of your friends on a Saturday in June, but you would also come down on a Tuesday afternoon in, October and want to have a beautiful garden space that you could rest and relax in. So the design has a playground, as you saw, that was taking inspiration from the Pennsylvania woodlands, using all custom equipment that speaks to that, with like a giant spider, a giant ant that kids can play in, high towers with slides and ropes and all kinds of fun things like that. Fully accessible as well for people of all ages and abilities. That the garden spaces, as I mentioned, really focusing on native plants and pollinator-friendly species to create a dynamic ecological and horticultural component to this project. With these smaller nodes cut in that can host programming of lots of different scales. So it doesn't have to be a huge festival that happens here. It can be a small community gathering space as well. Lots of other spaces built throughout the park that can be flexible and host a range of different activities that people might want to see here.
Very good. And these are some exciting in-progress photos. I mean, this for us is so rewarding. It took about 10 years to get this project funded, which was, I think, the heavy lift. But then it spent about 2 years in the ground, like relocating utilities and digging trenches and all necessary work, obviously, to support the new park, but not obvious to anyone that something significant was happening. So to see everything that's happening sort of above ground and vertically now, and to know that this is a certainty that's going to happen. You can see the truss system built now across the southbound lanes of I-95, soon to be built across the northbound lanes connecting over into the riverfront. So I'll just go through some of these photos so that everyone can see what the progress and the scale of the park. I'm always amazed every time that I walk through the construction site of the size of this, the scale of it. 12 acres. When you look at it in plan, as we showed, or overhead, when you actually stand there, you realize the significance of this public square that's going to be created on the riverfront, and to connect to the development theme. What that can mean then for the investment in the center section of the waterfront eventually. And just a little bit on that, as everyone knows, we had, I think, selected a development team to help us think about the 7-acre parcel in the Market Street site and the 3-acre parcel at the Basin site in the Durst organization. And while the vertical construction is sort of paused for the time, and you can see some of the reasons why here. First being that it's a massively active construction site, and to confuse that further with private development, it would be a difficult thing. The second is that the market conditions, at this time just simply didn't align for that scale of development to go forward. But we remain completely confident, as we have, and as I think we proved the concept that the public realm leading the way will produce good private investment and development on the waterfront that the city deserves. That the further along this park is in construction, the more confident we are that we'll realize the significant private development on these sites adjacent to it. So that is sort of the presentation, and I will pause, Nate, and turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Joe. Fantastic. I know I commute by that park almost every day. I cannot believe the scale of it as well. It's really staggering. And thank you for always keeping the trail open during all of this. I'm sure other people appreciate that. there's a couple questions kind of running through, and I think one of the things that just really you kind of touched on it at the end there with Durst sort of kind of fizzling out. Are you still interested in doing a master developer kind of condition for this, or is that all of those market conditions changing such that maybe that doesn't even make sense anymore? So maybe talk about that just a little bit.
Yep. Should I stop sharing, Nate, so we can all?
Sure. Yeah. So we can see.
I think that we're still interested in a cohesive development, especially on the Market Street site, that 7-acre site that sits directly adjacent to and will eventually connect into the park at Chestnut Street. And so that has to feel cohesive in one. There's a transportation network that runs there. The SEPTA buses come down there. There's an active link on Chestnut Street, and that site speaks on two different levels, both the riverfront level, and then the city sits 30 feet above the riverfront in that location. So the development has to feel really integrated into it there. The basin site could be something different. It's a much more modest site. It's probably a much more low rise sort of site there that speaks to obviously some residential, but then an active edge to that picks up and formalizes finally what Harbor Park was trying to demonstrate temporarily, which is that there's good access to the river, good amenities there within that area. And so I kind of think of them differently, Nate. Like the two sites are different. So whether there's a master developer on both sites or just that 1 7-acre site in coordination with someone is how we start to think about it. I don't know what goes first yet. You would think, you would think about the basin site as being the bite-sized chunk, right? Can something start in that area? The South Street Bridge will be the first vertical, completed element of the Penn's Landing project. And when that's up next year and then open to the public sometime after that, you could see that again, this concept of does that, sort of public infrastructure move incentivize some development to happen on that site. So think about it that way. On the big 7-acre site, again, there's no rush here. The city deserves something fantastic to happen there adjacent to this unbelievable infrastructure investment in the 12-acre park. So I think if we learned a lesson here, it's to take the time to get it right and to think about that what that really should be to complement the city of Philadelphia.
And I don't think enough people realize that 30-foot elevation change, like what it is from the river up to it. You look at old pictures and think, oh, it was just this happy-go-lucky thing. So I think that's pretty significant to go up there. But once you've done that, I know you've talked about all the, $100+ million of investment that's happened on east and, north and south of your development sites, which is just impressive and wonderful. There's a lot of people that are thinking, oh my goodness, what happens when Old City is a walkable connection to the riverfront? And so what is the impact there on Old City development, or maybe even bigger than that? I think that's something a lot of people are curious about.
Yeah, you can't say for certain, but you would think, when you look at the different squares in the city, or Rittenhouse Square and Logan, when you look at these, you think about the transformational impact that they had spiraling out sort of adjacent to them. And so I think that, what's a really difficult development area right now, that, sort of 100 block of Market Street, 200 block of Market Street, running along that block of Front Street there. And I think there's still a development parcel available on Front Street. When you look at that, you think, yeah, there has to be an immediate impact there, right? This park is going to sit here and it's going to at least impact that, I think, much wider than that. I think that the connections that it creates, the recreational connections, the direct connection to the river, something that was very important to us, the visible connection to the river. If you go down there, if you try to approach the riverfront historically, when you got the front and Chestnut Street, given the sort of infrastructure that was there in place at the time, the roadway was rising up. So you were just looking at blacktop. You had no idea that there was a river on the other side of that connection. So most people would just turn around and walk away from it. Here, through the sort of great engineering feats of the folks that helped to realize this vision, When you get to Front and Chestnut now, you'll have a direct view of the river. Like that will come into view for everyone. And so I think those things combined, Nate, the opportunities that it provides, the recreational opportunities, the direct connections will have a transformational effect, not only on the development parcels on the waterfront, but then start to grow out into the city and the Old City area.
Fantastic. I know just more going back to the park. A couple questions. One, when you expect it to be done, but also a more really granular question I think is important. From the success of the Delaware River Trail, how will folks get up to the park? I think that's something that's a little bit fuzzy for folks.
So the park, so the trail runs along obviously in different segments, either what we call the on-street trail segment that runs roughly from Washington Ave to Spring Garden Street, and then the river trail segments of that, which are sort of more generous segments that hug directly to the river itself when that sort of massive land is available to put that trail segment there. But the park, Penn's Landing Park is sort of two components. One is this 4-acre cap over the highway, right? So from Chestnut Street to Walnut Street, from Front Street to the west side of Delaware Avenue is a 4-acre elevated cap that covers over both lanes, all lanes of I-95 and then Delaware Avenue. And then this sloped 7-acre section of park that's on fill that gently takes you down to the riverfront. So it sort of takes the transition all the way down to the riverfront. So if you're using the riverfront esplanade as part of your trail experience, you can just seamlessly then go up the park and connect into Old City. There will be the more traditional infrastructure still available for folks. So if you approach Market Street Bridge right now, obviously there's a sort of ADA accessible ramp, as well as a set of steps to take you up. On the Walnut Street side, there will be something very similar to that, plus an elevator that'll take you there. But if you are traversing along the river, you can seamlessly just connect from the riverfront to now the 30-foot elevation in the city.
Joe, I'll just jump in there to be even more granular on that. From Columbus Boulevard, if you're on the trail, you'll go through Walnut Plaza, what we're calling, on the grade level, with both pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure that will connect you to an elevator and a set of steps with a bicycle ramp next to them at sort of like the midpoint there. For those who aren't all the way on the Esplanade level, which has, as Joe said, like just direct access up. And then from the top grade level at Front Street, both Chestnut and Walnut Street pathways are designated for both bicycle and pedestrian access as well.
Fantastic. I know there's a couple questions coming in on this. I know I was one of the people that filled out the survey about a potential mass transit option going down. I still want to call it Delaware Avenue, but Christopher Columbus Boulevard. Where's the status of that and sort of overall general as we add these thousands of new apartments, which again are wonderful to have all these new people there, but what kind of, how are you working with the different entities that control that strip of roadway to see, are there ways to ease congestion, to make things different? I know I love the new Rivermark development, but it is still scary as hell to walk across Delaware Ave there at Spring Garden. And so like those little things, like as we want more people to come to the waterfront, how are those things evolving, and whatever happened with that opinion survey about the bringing back potentially the train-like thing in the middle of the street? Call it Delaware Ave.
Yep. I'll start, Nate, and then I may tag Karen in. So there's been many studies and attempts to think about passenger rail along Delaware Avenue in that corridor. And it's such a large infrastructure investment, and there's such a proof of concept for there that's different than what we've done before in terms of, is the ridership there? Does it exist? Can you invest in something like this? How do you evergreen it? What entity is actually operating something like this? And so the survey we put out was as a result of a potential partnership that we had with two different entities that both have an interest in this. One being the Philadelphia Beltline Corporation, which is the sort of railroad that owns some of the rail within Delaware Avenue in Ray Street. So the rail that exists currently, but a train hasn't been on in a long time. And this other group called Pop-Up Metro, which is a subsidiary and smaller division of a larger railroad that had sort of patented a pop-up ADA accessible ramp system and rail cars that run on completely electric. And so we got into a relationship with them and started thinking about what we've done on the waterfront previously, which is there a proof of concept there? Is there a pop-up that we can say, we can deploy this thing, whether it's for a season, whether it runs like the Riverlink ferry system seasonally from May through October, connecting people to Camden. Does something like that exist where we don't have to prove these big ridership numbers, but we can prove momentum and we can show that this can work? And so we're still in that. We're in a feasibility stage right now with some engineers. And Karen, I don't know if you want to give any flavor to that. Karen's helping to spearhead this project.
Yeah, I don't know that there's much more to add. As Joe said, we're in this feasibility study to see what's really possible and what that timeline is. But I think I'll also just echo and add, I think that the survey that we did, and I think what we've seen in our waterfront transit study, which predated that, it feels like there's a lot of latent demand for transit. And so to Joe's point, if we can figure out, there's obviously a long-term, how can we bring more transit, but how can we test that? So that's what we're working on right now, to figure out what is possible. But I don't think we have a lot more details to add at this point, unless I'm missing something. But yeah, I think we remain committed and know that there is interest in additional transit options to the waterfront, along the waterfront, that we're trying to figure out right now.
Yeah. And then Nate, the other stuff's an ongoing concern and battle of ours, in that, we have the Connector Street program, which does a great job of bridging, like, sort of from the city, at least in some cases, like Spring Garden to the west side of the river, right? And then you have to cross 4 lanes of traffic and 2 turning lanes and all that stuff to get to the new river mark and the public space and trail network that they form there. And it's a constant conversation with both, I think, PennDOT and the city. How can that be improved? I think you've seen small gestures to that happen to date. Some of the speed cushions that have been placed along Delaware Avenue to try and slow traffic. Talking now about, like, are there mid-block crossings? How, and as Lizzie went through on Washington Avenue, what do these bump outs look like? How do we narrow the sort of width of that roadway so that you can more comfortably cross and feel better connected? So that's an ongoing thing. It's a lot of it is a regulatory thing with PennDOT. Right now, Delaware Ave is still a reliever road to I-95, so moving lanes of traffic are still very important to them. But hopefully over time we can start to, squeeze that down and make some of those larger connections like exist at Washington Ave, that exist at Spring Garden. We can make them, a better connection to the riverfront.
Fantastic. And I know on the connections point, that's, connecting two traditional working class neighborhoods of Pennsport at Washington Ave and Port Richmond up at Cumberland. I know there's plans for that. And I know there's recently DRWC has taken over control of the area underneath 95 in that little stretch kind of around Cumberland. And what does that look like? And because I think for those that don't get to this part of the city very often, I lived in Fishtown for 16 years. For 10 years, we dealt with 95 being closed down and all that problem. But what's revealed is there's a bike path underneath there. There's lots of potential for things to happen under there that as our city gets hotter, it's always going to be in the shade. It's going to be cooler because it's near the river. So I was excited very much when I heard that you guys were taking control of that. But what does that look like, and how do you envision bringing that in? And I just want to highlight the fact that traditional, obviously the city's changing, especially along the waterfront, but to allow the folks of Port Richmond to have access to the Delaware waterfront, that's something that hasn't happened in hundreds of years. And that's an incredible win for the good people of Port Richmond. So talk about that, whatever you can reveal.
It is. Nate, I'll give a little background, and then maybe Lizzie can give more specifics on both the Cumberland Connector and the trail study that goes north to provide more access to Port Richmond. But I guess it was about 9 years ago now when PennDOT was setting out to construct a highway in that area. PennDOT usually needs what's called a local partner. So if they're going to do anything that's outside the norm for them underneath the highway in terms of the design and construction of public improvements there, they need a public partner to step up and say, hey, once you build this, and we will co-design it, but once you build it, this public partner will now step in and operate, maintain, and potentially program that space. So 9 years ago, we raised our hands and we said, listen, we don't want just asphalt and chain link fences and to cut the community off from the riverfront because the highway's here. We'd like to see a real program developed here with, as you said, trails, landscaping, well-lit paths, some even plaza areas where the community could gather within that 55 acres is what it actually is of underneath I-95. So we raised our hands and we said, we'll do that. Let's work on the design together. And they built it. And it is, in some cases, a fantastic design element. Some stuff's great, sometimes not great. But DRWC is now preparing, we have not yet, but preparing to take over the operations and maintenance of that entire area. So we're starting to fit out our headquarters. We'll have our safety ambassadors up there very soon. Our maintenance folks will extend their reach now up into that area. And it will be treated as any other public space along the waterfront that we have developed and fall within our operations and maintenance there. And while we're doing that, it's a great connection both to the neighborhood and both to Allegheny Avenue, because Conrail sort of sits between the completion of the trail along the river. So at least we have a resource now. If you're on the trail, you can connect more seamlessly to Allegheny Avenue by using that PennDOT 55 acres. But we do have two initiatives. One, a construction initiative that's sooner, and then the further development of the trail network as it reaches through Port Richmond to finally give that neighborhood some kind of access to the riverfront. And this is very like Nate, when we started work in South Philadelphia, we only own one pier. We own the Washington Avenue Pier. We own this little tiny remnant of a pier. It wasn't even a pier. It was over vegetated, and as we like to say, returning to nature at the time. But we use that as a wedge to get the fuller access through South Philadelphia, the temporary trail to the permanent trail to the purchase of the 4 piers that will become the South Wetlands Park and Pier 68 as it currently exists. And we're hopeful that there's a move like that for Port Richmond, where we can acquire a piece of riverfront land to give them better access. We have the trail networks that form around North Bank right now. We managed to work with those developers and purchase those trail segments from them. So we'll fit those out for a better trail connection, but they're still lacking that public park space, that direct access to the river that we want to provide for them. And Lizzie, maybe you can pick up on Cumberland and the study that we've done for those connections north.
Yeah, our Delaware River Trail extension study that we completed last year and in the process of beginning implementation of did not just look at sort of like very basic trail alignment on the river's edge, though that's our high priority. It also looked at public space more broadly and connections to existing trail networks under I-95 and beyond into the neighborhood. So that study identified a couple of things like, improvements at the Aramingo intersection under I-95, improvements at Susquehanna Street, at Lehigh Avenue. But the one that really rose to the top was Cumberland Street as an opportunity to make a clearer connection between the upland neighborhoods with the trail that exists under I-95 to the trail areas that DRWC has managed to acquire from the North Bank developers. So that project is under design right now. We've completed survey and done some initial outreach to some of the city agencies and adjacent property owners based on the concept that was developed through the study. We'll be doing more public meetings on that later this fall or early winter. So we're really excited about that because we have both design and some initial construction funding for it as well. So that'll be a good opportunity. The study also identified some areas for more substantial public space, both on the water side around Diet Street and then also under I-95. As Joe said, there are these large sort of hardscaped areas that with some love could be gathering spaces for the community. So we've done some initial public outreach about what those areas could be, everything from, you know, skate parks to market spaces, community gathering spaces, some physical improvements, some just program spaces. So we definitely see that as an opportunity to enliven that space and make it feel more connected, not just physically, but from a community standpoint.
Fantastic. There's a question in about, and I can kind of reveal this to my personal stuff. I am one of the paddle boarders that is on the Delaware River. It's not for the faint of heart. It's quite a beast of a river at 45-foot depth. So how do, when people get to that waterfront, what is that like? Because we know the whole marina thing and that whole controversy of it being forced out and all that stuff. But is there a possibility that that is coming back, that there could be a place for a marina-like thing, or if those kayak launch points are there, how do you navigate with the boat traffic and dealing with the 6-foot tide and all of those fun things that happen on that glorious river?
So personal craft, Nate, on the riverfront. Yeah,
if you see the paddleboarder, that's me.
That is awesome. I had the joy and privilege of kayaking 10 miles on the river, starting in Penn's Landing and going all the way up to the Palmyra Heritage Center there under the Coney Palmyra Bridge, and then back down again. And it is not for the faint of heart, as you're chasing down freighters and tugboats in a working port area. But part of our mission is to get people back onto the river. So, you know, the river itself is the resource, and we're the sort of steward for the center section of that and how people approach it. And in the maritime side of things, right now, we treat that as a programmatic element. And so if you go down to the Penn's Landing Marina and Penn's Landing Boat Basin, which is adjacent to like the Seaport Museum and the Mashulu Restaurant, within that basin, there's a what's called Paddle Penn's Landing, and a swan boat, kayak boat, like sort of paddle program that happens there to introduce people and families to the river and how to get them on there safely. I think in the rendering that you saw, the South Wetlands Park, again, that would be a more controlled environment and sort of kayak channels through the piers, kind of keeping people away from the Federal Shipping Channel that you mentioned, at least for the time being. All leading, hopefully, to a larger recreational river at some point in time where people can, not just in motorized craft, but in personal craft, access the river and get across to Camden and explore all the things there. But for now, we treat that as a sort of programmatic element. We're always looking for ways to increase boaters to the city, whether the marina itself and the Philadelphia Marine Center ever comes back. We're always looking for opportunities to have exchange programs with the different boaters and to sort of show the river off and the city off in terms of visiting boats there. And so right now, the resource that we have available for that is the Penn's Landing Marina area, the two private marinas in Piers 3 and 5, and of course the Wiggins Park Marina, which is directly across the river and connects via the ferry to us. So they're kind of the marine components that we have right now.
Right. Yeah, and that little Petty's Island / little tiny slice of Venezuela that exists in Philadelphia. But down as we get down towards Washington Avenue, what is the future kind of plans, at least of the old sheet metal kind of gathering spot and the Coast Guard? Is that are there long-term plans for those facilities, or is that still what is going to be, or that's just some questions that have come up on that?
And yeah, Nick, so the answer is we don't know what they're going to be yet. I mean, the Wharton Pier development is the rear property of the sheet metal hall. The federal government obviously still owns the Coast Guard building. I know that at least at some point in the past couple of years, they were sort of overpopulated there. There was more employees than the building could hold, and whether that ever comes back into some redevelopment use, we don't know yet. One of the sort of difficulties in the plan, and why the sort of public realm led the way, as I was saying before, is that unlike some other cities, the city or DRWC, only owned about 5% of waterfront land when we started working here. Everything else was in private hands, whether they were developers or just prospectors holding large format parcels or post-industrial parcels. we had to step-by-step acquire waterfront land, waterfront setbacks, trail setbacks, and use that acquisition to show that there's something, you know, bigger or better that could be developed on the waterfront. So we don't own those areas; they're privately held, but we have successfully at least purchased the waterfront setbacks and everything that you've mentioned there. And we hope that that same concept that we've showed both on Ray Street and stretching north starts to stretch forth in that way in South Philadelphia.
Wonderful. I'm combing through some of the other questions that we're getting. To what extent do you guys have influence on retail offerings? I think the Sprouts Market is fantastic and wonderful. If nobody has been in there yet, it's a wonderful addition for all those new people that are going to be living around there. But are you more of an advisory level? Do you, if it's your development, do you have sort of control over things to get different types of retail offerings in there and all that type of stuff? And I think they're just questions about riverfront access and retail.
Sure. So we work in different ways, Nate. We're not a regulatory agency. So, we cannot dictate what a private developer does. If it's a private developer not in partnership with DRWC. So obviously we have some private development parcels ourselves, Rivermark being one of them where we partnered and there we had some direct influence on what that both the site looked like, the public access looked like, and the retail offerings look like, especially along Spring Garden Street with the Sprouts Grocers and some other restaurant uses that will pop up there very soon. In terms of private development that we're not partnering with or don't have direct control over, it's really a component of either zoning and whether, the sort of street activation that has been written into zoning and the retail offerings all the way up through a bonus system, and just us then commenting or working with a private developer saying, this is what we found through public engagement and outreach through the master plan. This is what's desired for the waterfront for that. So it's a couple different buckets there. One, we have sort of not direct control over, but direct influence on if it's a property that DRWC is developing. And the other is trying to proactively work with private developers that are developing on the waterfront, either through zoning or just conversation with them to put that kind of resource into the riverfront and complete the street edge there.
Fantastic. So I think we can pretty much wrap up, but someone did note that you didn't mention when you expect the park at Penn's Landing to officially open. So maybe we can close with that official or somewhat official opening date.
Yeah, I wish I knew an exact date, Nate. It's a moving target, and talking to contractors and PennDOT is difficult in that way. I will say we think 29 is a good target. There's, and I'm sure Lizzie can weigh in, are good progress meetings where the contractors seem to be making like real headway into things that they shouldn't be touching yet. But we'll stick with the 29 date for now and say that would be an expected end date. I will say too that, as we've done before, sometimes things can come on in phases. As things complete, there may be access earlier than the entire completion or punch list of a project.
And the South Street Bridge is going to open well before then, so we'll have that access and that iconic structure in place. We're thinking that it could be open to the public by this time or a little later next year even. So
wow. Great. Well, I'll toss it back to Eli.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. If folks, if you're so inclined, throw your cameras on. We'll do our virtual round of applause for Joe, Lizzie, and Karen. We really appreciate your willingness to come and share and give us the lay of the land. So thank you very much. Just in wrapping up, I will throw that support DAG link in the chat one more time because we have to do it these last couple months. We appreciate those of you who contributed during the program. So we will be back in person for 2 more meetings at the Center for Design Philadelphia about the President's House on November 12th and meeting with John Fry on December 17th. Other than that, thank you again, and everyone enjoy your Thursday.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
everyone.